So thanks for your time. We are now with Douglas Hickey, who is the General Commissioner of US Pavilion at the ExpoMilano, dedicated to food. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
I would like to know, you have just commented about the role that innovation and technology may have to address some of the challenges we have related to food. Mm-hmm. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so my background is as a venture capitalist before I moved to Milan for Expo. So I'm a firm believer that innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship are really critical. And when you look at the food issue of how we feed 9 billion people by 2050, innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship have to play a key role in that, whether it be around technologies of how we distribute food, how we grow food, how we preserve food. I think it's going to be a critical element in how we solve this key problem.
Mm-hmm. And we just like to talk about the ecosystem, the food ecosystem. What do you think is the role of any of the actors that have a play in this ecosystem?
Sure.
What is their role?
Yeah, the ecosystem is really a complicated one. So it starts from the farmer all the way to the table. So farmers obviously are going to play a key role there. Governments play a key role. Entrepreneurs play a key role. Financing sources have to fit into that. So it's just like any other complicated ecosystem. There's a role for many people in it. They all have to work together on it. But when you think about the ecosystem in food, it's probably the most critical thing we can think about because everyone consumes food. There's very few other food and water. There's very few other things that takes place in. So it's a very complicated ecosystem, but there's opportunities that exist in that ecosystem that I think are really important. So important to investors, important to entrepreneurs, important to governments around the world. So it's one of the few elements, I think, where people can really come together and governments can come together and work on a very important issue here.
Okay. I would like to be more concrete on that. If you can give some examples of those opportunities you mentioned. You have a background as an entrepreneur, mm-hmm. as an investor. Where are the opportunities that you see in this area?
I mean, it's interesting. I think they're at virtually every level. So if you think about in the field, so how do we use less water to grow the same amount of crop? How do we get better crop yields out of the same amount of land? How do we preserve land in a better way? So when you think about that, it's about irrigation technologies, about seed technologies, and then when you talk about the distribution and preservation of food, how do I get it from point A to point B in a very safe, effective, and sustainable way? That's all going to be done, I think, with technology in order to accomplish that. And then what do you do with waste food? How do you really reduce the amount of waste food that's available? That's all going to be through data analytics, I think, where people are really going to get an understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what should be grown, what should be distributed. So data is going to become a really important element in the food chain, just like it has been in transportation, in logistics, in all of these other technologies that have been developed over the last number of decades.
But when you see the figures of investment in food tech, you see that most of this investment goes to, for example, food delivery or media or this kind of companies that maybe are more in the marketing area of the food technology.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be at every area. So as an example, I think there's bioengineering, if you will, that's going to take place where different seed types are going to be developed that use less water, that are more drought tolerant, those kinds of things. So I think it really takes place at the field and then all the way through the supply chain of delivery, of preservation. I think so virtually at every layer of the supply chain, I think there's opportunity here. And that's why I think it's so exciting. So when you look at it from a social perspective, we all have a responsibility to help feed our neighbors, whether we're sitting next to our neighbor or our neighbors around the world. It's important to do. So there's a social responsibility, there's a government responsibility, and then there's a sort of investment opportunity in that, which I think is very unique. So it's a great sort of ecosystem that can be taken advantage of by a whole series of folks for the betterment of the world, and that rarely happens.
Okay, and finally, you have just mentioned that your mission here is about to finish. So, what are your next challenges?
I don't know. I think that it's been an amazing experience to be here in Italy, to be part of Expo. I'm proud of the work that the United States did here and continues to do. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next, but I'm sure it'll be something interesting, and I'm ready for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's around investment in this area, around food tech and food technologies. So I'm looking at those kind of opportunities as well.
Okay, so just as finishing, a good tip for people in this industry.
A good tip for the people in this industry, it's a huge industry. It's probably the biggest industry when you think about it in any segment. So there's multiple opportunities in it. I think we all have a social responsibility to help participate in it. So this is one of those opportunities where you can do good and you can also be a savvy investor, if you will. So I think that that's very unique. So we can help solve one of the world's biggest problems of how do we feed 9 billion people by 2050. And in that, there's all kinds of opportunities that exist to build entrepreneurial companies. So that's why I think it's very exciting.
Okay, thank you very much for your time and good luck in your new challenges.
Thank you, appreciate it.